have a clear outline that I hope will give you a verbal cue as to where we're going today. The subject of the talk is fundraising. Okay, we're going to be talking about fundraising the whole time. But three aspects of fundraising I hope to cover in our time today. And that is the why of fundraising. Why do we do this? The how of fundraising. We're going to spend most of our time talking about how do you do fundraising. And then finally, some practical issues that arise in doing effective fundraising. So, why do we fundraise? How do we fundraise? And what are some practical issues that will arise with regard to fundraising? And then we're going to punctuate that outline with two sort of group activities regarding some things that I want you to read that I brought along to hopefully illustrate some of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. Okay? Any questions on where we're headed in our next couple of minutes? No? Okay. Well, let's start with the first part, why fundraising. Viktor Frankl, some of you may know that name, the survivor, wrote in his seminal work, Man's Search for Meaning, page 80, he said, quote, "Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how." Those who have a why to live can bear almost any how. I love that quote because it says that if you understand why you're doing something, you can do just about anything. And this is from a Holocaust survivor. Gosh, what a great quote. So just a few thoughts that I want to share on why fundraising is important. And these are in no particular order, but it's helpful to know why we're doing this. First reason why we should be concerned with fundraising is because, quite simply, we can't do our jobs without money. We can't do our jobs without money. We live in a world, and I would use theological language, God has created a world in which money is the medium of exchange. It's how we judge value. It's a crude measure, I'll be granted, but it's the way we judge value, risk, reward, cost. It's one of the means by which we judge success. It is not the only means, it's not even maybe the best mean, but it is an important means that we use. All of these things are necessary in running a successful nonprofit organization. We also should be concerned about fundraising, and this is a much more sort of exalted reason, because our donors want to change the world. Our donors want to change the world. Last year at Heritage, one part of our development shop is growing tremendously. So I had the chance to hire 4 staff people to work at Major Gifts, which is my sort of background. And so I interviewed a lot of people last year and went through a lot of good candidates and not so good candidates. And one of the questions that we ask at Heritage is, why do people give? Why do people give? And there are a lot of great answers to that question. And I've thought quite a bit about that. And I've settled on sort of a Abraham Maslow, the hierarchy of needs guy, right? The top level of that hierarchy of needs is self-actualization, right? We do things to actualize ourselves. And I'm convinced that at heart, that is why most people give to nonprofits. It is because there's some way that they are actualizing themselves by making this gift to our work. They are, in many ways, sort of completing their humanity by giving us money, because they see our work as a solution to some huge problem. They have they don't have the solutions themselves, but they're looking for solutions to these problems. And so that's why they give. It fulfills themselves. They have a role to play in our work, or maybe I should say we have a role to play in their view of the world. We have a role to play in their vision for a better world. Another way of saying this is that our donors merely have money. You ever think about it that way? Our donors merely have money. What do we have in this transaction?
The vision?
We have the vision, we've got the solutions to whatever problem they have identified as important to them. All they bring is cash, right? What do we bring? We bring solutions to the most important problems that they see in the world. So, to me, that is sort of a revolutionizing way to think about fundraising, and very sort of countercultural to the task. And usually when you think about fundraising, people talk about fundraising, you think about hitting people up, or looking at people as targets, right? There are all these kind of sort of crude metaphors that we use to talk about fundraising. I hate them all. I hate them all.
Yeah.
Because they don't adequately describe exactly what we're doing. We are saving the world. We're making life better for children and families, especially this conference. My gosh. I mean, this is the core of what's wrong with our world, right? We're saving the world. And we're inviting donors to be a part of that. They see us as saving the world. All they bring to the solution is money. So I think it's a really powerful thought as to why we should be involved in fundraising. Final thought about why fundraising. I really believe that good and successful fundraising makes us better nonprofit managers. It makes us better at what we do. Why does it make us better? It makes us better communicators. It makes us better sort of explainers of our mission. You've heard the phrase elevator pitch. What's your elevator pitch? You've got 30 floors on an elevator to describe what you do to someone who has no idea what you do. Boom, what is that? Fundraising helps you do that. It disciplines your message so you can include more people in your work. It makes us more aware of what's important to our donors so we can respond to that. Why are they giving to us? It makes us more aware of what may be working and isn't working. Fundraising does all of that for us. So I really actually believe that fundraising makes us better at achieving our mission as nonprofit leaders. So we should be concerned about fundraising because it takes money to do what we want to do. We feel like God has called us to do it. It allows our donors to change the world, and it actually makes us better at doing what we think we are called to do. I think it's important to establish the why of fundraising before we get into any kind of how techniques or any of that kind of stuff. Before we leave the why of fundraising, I want to loop back with our opening exercise when I asked you to recall something memorable that someone asked of you and why that was memorable. And that is, I want to hit on something that may be self-evident, but I find that a lot of people struggle with or don't think about, and that is the importance of asking. The importance of asking. When I meet somebody for the first time, whether at a cocktail party or in church or somewhere, maybe a visitor to our church, and we sort of chat, what do you do? And I tell them what I do, and they say, what do you do? And I say, well, I raise money for the Heritage Foundation. Sometimes the response to this is, wow, how do you do that? I could never do what you do, right? Anybody ever hear that? Have you ever talked about you're involved with money, right? I sort of have developed kind of a simple and a little snarky response to that, but there's more truth in it than snark. And that is, I'll come back and I'll say, well, I've always found that asking really helps. Asking really helps. It's interesting, as people think about the development task, they think they know what would make a good development person. Oh, this person loves to hang out and schmooze with people. This person loves to, hang out with others. Maybe they're good looking or something, right? So they would be good at fundraising. And maybe some of those things, schmoozing or hanging out with people or being attractive or whatever, they might, have a small amount to do with actual real fundraising work. But if you don't ask for money, if you're intimidated by asking, if you don't think asking is important or necessary, it is very unlikely that you will be effective and good at fundraising. You have to ask. Now I know this is controversial. One of the largest pro-family organizations for many years, Focus on the Family, an organization that I was raised and still hum the original theme song to Dr. Dobson's radio show that I listened to. My mom played when I was in the 70s. I love Focus. For many years, their major gifts team on their development were not allowed to ask for money. They actually just go and hang out. And they're very successful. But that is actually changing. They're changing the business model there at Focus. I was talking to someone who's with them 18 years on Monday this week. We just hired a coach and that's changing. So we have to be prepared to ask for money. I want to hit that because a lot of people may be resistant to that idea or have some trepidation. That's fine. Trepidation is fine. But we need to understand we need to ask. Okay, so let me just close the first section, why fundraising, by asking a few questions. Do you see the importance of why we need to be concerned about fundraising? And are you able to ask for money for your cause? Do you see the importance, and do you think you're able to ask? Okay? Good. Any thoughts before we move on to the how of fundraising? Yes, go ahead.
So when you were talking about the exchange between the donor and you,
yes.
It seems to me that really what you're doing is transferring a service. So they're actually paying for a service. So we shouldn't feel guilty for asking for money because really what we're doing is exchanging a product, right?
Right to a point.
Okay.
They are not, when someone gives charitably to an organization, they are giving a gift. They are not writing a contract, okay? There's a distinction between contracts. So you hire someone to come to your house and build a deck, right? Comes out, he estimates it, gives you a quote, right? You might sign a contract. He does his work, you pay him the money, he goes home, that's it, right?
But it's different with like a doctor or a dentist. You go in and they provide a service for you, you pay them and you leave.
You pay them, that's right, that's right. With nonprofits, there's this whole thing of altruism. Why are you giving money? You're giving money because you're saving the world. You are saving the world. A doctor or dentist is not saving the world. He's providing health to you. A guy who comes to build the deck is not saving the world. He's doing a service for you. So they're related. There is a transaction part of it. But I don't want to push that analogy too far because mission is critical. Mission is critical. Yes?
I've noticed in my past
Yeah.
there's a difference between just simply asking and then asking for a specific amount.
Great point.
Are you going to get into that?
I'm going to get into that. You bet. Absolutely. So let's hold that, and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that distinction when we get to that point. Thank you. Yes?
So you have said it several times about being prepared to ask. And for me, it's been early on, I've put my head down, kind of sort of maybe. I mean, I just had no confidence in it, right?
Right, sure.
And then over time, I'm getting a little more bold, but I still don't feel like I'm prepared.
Sure. And I want to just echo that. I still get nervous. I've been doing this for 9 years. It's the longest job I've ever had in my life, working for Heritage Raising Money. Best job I've ever had in my life. And especially when you're talking about, 7-figure gifts, right? So we'll talk a little bit about how we can overcome some of those, things. Yeah, that's great. Great point. Okay, let's get into now the how of fundraising. Talk about the why. Let's move to the how of fundraising. In this section, we're going to talk about the donor cycle, and then 3 broad categories of fundraising. Okay, so one donor, let's use Trinitarian language. One donor cycle in 3 categories, right? 1 donor, 3 persons. Okay. One donor cycle in 3 categories. Okay, so what is the donor cycle? Well, I like to think of development as sort of analogous to the cycle of life, right? You're born, you grow up, you become a teen, you might go off to college, you get established, maybe you get married, hopefully you get married. You start having kids, making money, doing well in your career. Those kids grow up, you have to educate those kids and sort of civilize those kids. They grow up, they leave, you become empty nesters, you retire, hopefully you enjoy your retirement in your late life, and then what happens? Then you pass away, you die, right? Well, giving roughly tracks this life cycle of every human being. And levels of giving track this broad lifestyle, beginning at the sort of going off to college stage of a person's life. What do I mean by that? Well, when you're in your 20s and you're maybe just out of college, you may do some charitable giving, but it's at a fairly low level. And it's more than likely it's going to stay at a fairly low level until you become established in your career. You might give money to your alma mater to get the calendar. My wife, we would give $50 to my wife's alma mater because she likes the calendar, and so we stay on. And so when the Fundraising guy calls, and we give $50, and he's always there trying to upsell us, which is great. That's fun. That's his job. We do 100? No, we're going to do 50. Because we're in the phase of life. I have 3 kids, 8, 10, and 12, who are educated privately, and I don't have the money, to give at this point in my life. So then after college, you get into your career, you do better in your career, you might make some more money, and you are in a position, maybe in your 30s or 40s, to give larger gifts to those organizations that you care about. Then as you move into your 50s and 60s, you're finished with longer-term financial obligations, like your mortgage or paying for your kids' college education, and you might have additional income then to give. You're at your peak earning years in your 50s and 60s. Then you retire. You do some estate planning, hopefully, before you pass away. And in that estate planning, hopefully you'll remember some charitable intentions in your estate. So think of that sort of life cycle as you think about the development task. Another way to summarize what I just said, 4 general phases of a person's life as an adult. The establishment phase, 18 to 30 or so. The acquisition phase, maybe mid-20s to 60. The distribution phase, 60 to 75. And then maybe you might use the term the disposition phase, 75 and above.
Can you say this again? Sorry.
Yeah, and this is just my own, I just sort of made this up. Other people have echoed this in the development world. The establishment phase, and I'll just peg that at 18 to 30, I mean, you can play with these numbers, but acquisition phase, you're trying to acquire assets in your life. To save for college or to save for your retirement, right? Then you move into a distribution phase, maybe in your 60s, mid-70s, and then you start thinking about your disposition, the disposition phase. What am I going to do with the resources that God has blessed me with? Okay. That's important to keep in mind as we think about the asking question, as we think about interacting with donors. Generally speaking, 20 and 30-year-olds are not going to be your $10,000 donors. There are exceptions to this. Trust fund kids, right? Folks who come from independently wealthy families or have some role to play in a charity, a family foundation. That's great, but those are exceptions to the rule. Also helps explain at Heritage, we at some of our major donor events, if you were to come to those events, you'll see a lot of sort of oldish-looking people there. And our oldish-looking donors, every year, we just had our major donor conference 2 weeks ago, they always say the same thing, which is, how come there aren't more young people here in this room? The average age of a Heritage donor has been the same for 25 years, 71. 71. We have 500,000 donors to Heritage, and the average age is 71. And despite our best efforts at trying to lower that age, it's been that way for almost 3 decades. And it's that way for other major charities as well. The question is why. I think one of the huge answers to that question is phases of people's lives. Once you enter into the distribution phase of your life, you have more money to give. And so therefore you start giving it away. So just to be aware of that as we're thinking about our solicitations of folks. Okay, so that's the donor life cycle. Let's now talk about sort of 3 categories of development in their fundraising. And this will track low dollar to, generally speaking, high dollar, okay? However we define those terms, and every organization has different definitions. Your organization will define them differently than others, okay? So the first category is what I would just call direct marketing or broad membership giving. And you'll have to define this on your own. For Heritage, a direct marketing or general membership, broad membership member is anybody who gives, let's say, $25 a year to 1,000, 25 to 1,000. This is, if you were to plot giving on a triangle, your givers on a triangle, this is the base of the triangle, the base of your support. You have more people doing this, but they're giving lower levels of gifts. The big questions, and I am not an expert in direct mail or in broad marketing. My expertise is in major gifts and legacy. So I'm a bit of a novice, but I am good enough friends with our director of membership at Heritage. We have lunch every 6 months, and I soak up his wisdom. So this is what he's told me personally for my 30 years. So the issues here are acquisition of new donors. How are we going to get more people to give to us? What are the methods we're going to use to acquire these donors? Is it word of mouth? Is it hosting small events in homes? What is the role of your board in helping you acquire new givers to your organization? Are we going to dabble in direct mail? Are we going to buy a list? You know, there are national companies, lots of them, from whom you can buy lists of donors. There are mail houses that you can hire to do the whole process. It is extremely expensive to do this. And typically, the question you have to ask yourself is, how much money am I prepared to lose as we acquire these donors in the short term, so that I can nurture these donors so they become major donors in the long term. Okay. Another sort of thing you want to think about in this phase is the importance of the second gift. If a new donor gives to you $25, $50, it is critically important for you to do as much as you possibly can to get that person to give a second time, hopefully within a 12-month period. Why is that so important? I just read the data this morning. Again, I got an email from one of the resources I'll give to you, who said this: 80 to 90% of those who give a second gift will give again. Will give again. The number for a first-time giver who does not give a second gift, it's way lower. It's like 30%. So it's critically important that with new donors, you try to inspire them to give again. That second gift is critical. Same dynamic with a third gift. 89% of people who give you third gifts will give again. Okay. It's not 100%, because why? Because people die, people drop off, attrition. You never have 100%, generally speaking, a renewal rate. Okay. So direct mail, phone operations. If you don't have the staff or the resources to do a large direct mail, you can utilize the phone. Lower level giving clubs. The reason why we have giving clubs at certain levels, you know why we do that? To inspire people to give more money. That's why we do that, because they're effective in moving people up the giving level. A couple of other thoughts in this area. For your letters that you send to your donors, or that you use to acquire new donors, do you write those letters with stories of impact? Stories of impact. Or are you just talking about data from your cause? This is our challenge as conservatives, right? Especially free market conservatives from a think tank. We're so tempted to like argue the data with someone rather than arguing how our policies are going to improve the lives of a person. Jim DeMint, our new president of Heritage, talks about, as conservatives, if our job was to convince someone to take a trip to Hawaii, we would be tempted to tell them about the fuel efficiency of the 747 versus the beaches or the family time that they'll enjoy once they get to Hawaii, right? So are your letters focusing on stories of impact? Yes, go ahead.
So I'm having actually the exact opposite problem. I have great stories, people are sold on it, and I keep getting emails back saying, give us more metrics.
Really?
Yes.
Then
I'm
go.
story heavy.
That's great. Yeah.
So is it
That's
like
great
an
feedback.
even mix, or do you give?
Oh yeah. The general, what it's the same. It's the same as giving a good speech, right? You begin with humor, you argue with logic, and then you conclude with emotion.
Okay, humor, logic, emotion.
Yeah, that's the sort of the
What
classic.
if I do emotion, logic, emotion? Same thing?
Sure. Emotion and a story.
Right.
Yeah. Another sort of rubric you may want to consider is threat solution. Almost every direct mail letter you'll get from the Heritage Foundation follows that element, threat solution. The liberals are taking over Washington. They're ruining lives for you. But the solution is giving to the Heritage Foundation because we're pursuing free opportunity.
Is that really all you say in that? Well, they know the Heritage Foundation.
Not when we acquired them.
Really?
Yeah, okay, yeah. We've got a great brand presence. 50% of Americans have heard of us before, yes. So there is some advantage.
So would you expand on, so for someone like me who doesn't know that brand?
Yeah, sure.
Would you expand on why giving to Heritage Foundation would solve that?
That's right, exactly. Linking the solution to their gift.
Okay.
So threat, solution. What's the threat?
The solution is identical to meaning the organization, what we're doing.
That's right, your mission. So this young lady, I forget the woman at the UN, right?
Yeah.
What's the threat? The threat is the UN is ruining lives for women because they are pursuing all these like awful policies. The solution is investing in the next generation of conservative women leaders so that we can represent the values that we care about in this very arena. Consider, sponsoring one of these ladies to go to the UN. I'm just thinking out loud.
Right, no,
based
that's
on what you
good.
said. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
But the sponsor, when you mentioned like people buy a list of sponsors,
Yeah.
I thought there's supposed to be an arrangement that from the organization saying, we will not disclose your information to other organizations.
It depends on the organization. Each organization has its own policy for the handling of donor data.
But the buying of the list that you mentioned,
Yeah.
is that from a that's their only businesses to sell?
Yeah,
donors?
a big, and again, this is not my area of expertise. A big company that I know does this is called Conrad Direct. So you can go in and talk to them and say, okay, I want, all, and you just give them the selects, all donors who have given to pro-family organizations. Now again, I don't know, they can tell you what data they have and what records they have. Or maybe you want to do all donors who are Ted Cruz FEC givers, right? If anybody makes a political donation, that is public information. And so you might want to say, I want all Ted Cruz givers within a 100-mile radius of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, right? Yeah.
I thought that using those for fundraising purposes was illegal, that I couldn't get on there and use that information, but companies can use it and then sell it to me? Because if it's public information, yeah.
Well, with the Ted Cruz example,
Right.
anybody who makes a political contribution has to disclose that to the FEC.
Right, and I can get on there, I can see all that, but
Right.
someone told me that it was illegal to get on there and do that, to use those names for fundraising purposes. Is that not true?
That's not true. It's fine.
We're all done.
I don't think it's,
I have all kinds of lists, yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
I think the issue with that is kind of involved.
Yeah.
It's illegal to go up on the FEC thing and use, and just download that.
Well, that's what I'm
But
getting
the
at.
Ted Cruz people can take the people and give money to them.
And they sell their
And
list.
Oh, I see, okay, so what I asked was illegal, and that's the difference. So I myself can't get on the FEC list, download it, and then contact those people.
Yeah, and we've done that. And-
I've done it, and people told me I'm not allowed to do it.
No,
so
no,
I
but
quit.
we bought lists, and, yeah, what happens is these groups will rent their lists out to the companies.
Yeah.
And the companies will run them out, and you can choose what kind of people you want.
Right.
That's exactly what we said.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, and different organizations, the way we handle it at Heritage, I'll just tell you what our policy is. Any donor who tells us they do not want us to sell their name, we will not sell their name. Absolute ironclad guarantee, right? There's a switch on our database. Any donor that gives to us at 1,000 and above, which is sort of our major gift level, we will not sell at all, because we feel like at that level they have a relationship with us that we want to make sure we can control. Donors below that level, we will, with like-minded organizations, broker them, you know, and that gives us access to other organizations so that we can do donor acquisition ourselves.
Sorry, I just want to clarify
Yeah.
again. So I don't necessarily have to go to Conrad Direct, I can actually come directly to Heritage Foundation or make.
No. No, we don't, we
You
use.
actually work with the
That's right.
company, so we
That's
have to,
right.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
And we do that because we want access to other
Right.
nonprofits lists who also are participating.
Right.
Because we're always constantly acquiring new donors because a certain percentage are dying and we need to replace and build. Yes,
I just was curious, I'm sorry, I don't know the more I can ask questions right now, but.
that's fine.
For a place like Conrad Direct,
Yeah.
like, do they have, do they like, literally is their job to come up with donors, like people that might be good sponsors for other organizations to ask,
No, their job is to sell lists.
sell lists? And do they categorize lists?
I don't know. You know, this is
That I
the
can't
part.
answer because I've done it. You can do it as far as they live in Hoboken, Connecticut,
Yeah.
and they voted for this specific person and they're pro-life. And they'll say, here you go.
Yeah.
They wouldn't tell you who it's from.
Okay.
They'll say it's from this company.
Okay, yeah. This is good. This is really helpful information.
Because you don't want to reach out to somebody who's not even going to be in agreement with whatever your
Well, that's
organization is
right.
trying to do.
Exactly. And they will pinpoint it to the letter.
Okay, good, thank you.
But can you say something about if you're just starting up
Yeah.
a group, right? To start up, it's different to just keep up because at least you have something to fall back on. But you can even jumpstart if you have no kind of fundraising for those who are either starting a new branch
Yeah.
or starting a completely new organization.
Yeah. Well, and that's, you know, if you're starting out, it's about shoe leather. It's about getting your friends, it's about fundraising, you know? Getting your network to sell your vision and host little coffees and host kind of events, you know? All kinds of ways to enlist donors. Utilizing social media networks for online giving, all that kind of stuff. I am so blessed to work at Heritage today. We have 503,000 members, which is down, unfortunately, from 2 weeks ago, for many reasons. But because of great decisions made in the 1970s by our founders to invest in direct mail. And we're now reaping the benefits of those decisions, particularly our legacy of giving, which is what I like. So, I mean, it's just very hard. It's just very hard. Good question. This is great. Great. So a couple of questions as we end the direct marketing, direct membership part category. The question is, as you're starting out, do you know how many donors your organization has? Do you know that? It's amazing to me how many small nonprofit folks that I interact with have no idea. Find out and define a donor in however you want to define it. For us at Heritage, a donor is anybody who's given any amount of money in a 24-month period. We do 24 months because we want to give folks grace, things happen and they forget, whatever, so we extend it up to 2 years. But pick 12 months, pick 24 months, I wouldn't go out much more past 24 months because if they haven't given to you in 2 years, they just become a sort of a qualified prospect list. But pick that period and ask yourself, how many donors do we have? Then, once you have that number, or a rough approximation of that number, do you have a plan to grow that number over the next X amount of months, right, or years, by a specific percentage over that period of time? And then, who in your organization has ownership of this plan? And is their plan credible? Do they have the resources they need? And that's not always money. It's personnel. It's volunteer work. It's so on and so forth. Do they have the resources that they need to achieve that goal, or have a reasonable shot of achieving that goal? Let's say you've got 200 donors, 100 donors. What's your plan for growing that by 10% next year, or 20%, 120, Another question, what role does your board play in bringing new donors into your organization? What role does your board play? There's a phrase that is sometimes used to describe the fundraising function of our boards of trustees. Give, get, or get off, right? Give, get, or get off. Kind of harsh. Sounds kind of harsh. But I would argue, for most folks who you want to consider to be on your board, fundraising needs to be a part of what their function is. Now, that's not true for every board member, and certainly at Heritage, not every board member is responsible for giving lots of money. We have other board members who are there for different purposes. And your organizations, that'll be true as well. But a major part of being a trustee, the board of trustees, think about the definition of the word trustee, someone is giving you the trust to ensure the future of this organization. And so fundraising is a part of that. Work, wealth, and wisdom is another way to describe a board member's role. Work, wealth, and wisdom. I might put wealth at the beginning. You can have that. So do you have a development committee of your board of trustees that is specifically charged with growing the number of donors, growing the amount of money that your organization raises? You might want to consider that. All right, so this level of donor, the direct membership marketing donor, is really important to have a growing base for two reasons. One, they provide much needed sustaining support to your organization. They give general operations. When you give 25 or 50 or $100 to an organization, it's general operations support. So the more you have, the more general support you have. But they're also important because they then become the pipeline that will lead you to your major and eventually your legacy givers. If you look at the average $10,000 donor to Heritage, the one factor of any factor, at least that we've studied, that is more determinative of whether or not someone will become a $10,000 donor to Heritage is whether or not they already give to us. Something like 70% of our existing 10K donors used to be smaller level donors. So you need to have a broad pool of folks to try to inspire them. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about major gifts. As a category of giving, major gifts, you have to make the decision in your organization what constitutes a major gift. You may want to think about 500 to 5,000, 1,000 to 10,000, whatever that is. The ask of this level of donor is less frequent, 1 to 3 times a year. Typically, donors in this category have access to more quote, exclusive giving clubs, with greater organizational access, more frequent communication. For us at Heritage, for our 1,000 and above donors, we do what's called our President's Club mailer 10 times a year. Typically every month we take a month off, 2 months off in the summer. And we send them a 3-page letter from Senator Dement, and there's no ask. It's merely updating them on what's going on in Washington, what's hot, and thanking them for their investment. So we do that for our 1,000 and above donors. So we're going to talk a little bit more about major gifts in a few minutes. So that's the second category. Third category is legacy gifts. This may feel like the most renewed kind of giving from some of you who have newer or smaller organizations. But I do want to talk, and I'll talk more about legacy gifts. Oftentimes, legacy gifts represent the largest gift of a person's life, and it's incredibly special and important, and so we'll talk about them. Typically, they're from your donors who've given 5+ years or more, who've been with you for a while. I spent a good part of yesterday visiting with 4 donors here in the Salt Lake City area who've been giving to Heritage for more than 5 years, asking them to remember us in their states. Do you have a handle on the numbers of donors that are in your organization in these various categories? Direct mail marketing and 1,000 above or 500 above, how you define major gifts. And do you have a plan to try to grow each category? Okay. So after you have a good number of smaller level donors giving annually, and you're growing that number, you need to ask yourself, how can I move as many of these donors as possible to a major gift level of support? Okay. What needs to be done in order for as many of these as possible to move up? So we're going to talk a little bit about 4 phases of the major gift cycle that will give you a sense of how to do this. Okay, 4 phases. So we talked about direct mail marketing. Now we're on major gifts. How do we generate more major gifts to our clients? First phase in the major gift cycle is identification. How do I identify people who could make a major gift to our organization? For this, let me give you a giving metric in one of the books that I'll refer to later. This is Bill Sturdivant's awesome book called The Artful Journey. It is probably the fundraising book that's had a greater impact on me as a major gift officer than any other book. Bill helped raise a couple of $1 billion at the University of Illinois, and he's written a book on major gift fundraising. It is awesome.
What was the title again?
I'll give it to you. I've got some resources here.
Okay.
But anyway, for this first step, he recommends going through your initial wealth screening. And again, this is different for each organization. Some of you might have 10,000 donors, some of you might have 1,000 or 500 donors, okay? So you have to decide who you're going to do this with, and go through and rank them or rate them on 2 metrics. 2 metrics. The first metric is capacity. Does this donor, Joe Blow, have the capacity to make a major gift to our organization? Do they have the capacity? Talk about my parents for a little bit. My mom and dad are just wonderful people. You know, mom was a nurse, dad was a school teacher, middle-class Americans. They love the Heritage Foundation, but they also love lots of other groups. I can tell you right now, even though they love the Heritage Foundation, there ain't no way they've got the capacity to make a $10,000 gift. They just don't. So as we're thinking about who is going to make a $10,000 gift, and if we come to the name of my parents on our donor list, I'm going to say, you know what, we need to just move on, because even though they love us, they don't have the money to be able to make it. So we have to think about it. They have the capacity. So, you know, in answering this question, we can do research on donors. There's an incredible amount of publicly available research that you can find. We talked about FEC giving, which is all public. You can tell who has maxed out to whatever candidates based on what the FEC website has. You can tell asset capacity of real estate, at least for individuals. Now, sophisticated donors know how to hide their assets really well, so you can't find it, that's fine. Major stock holdings for company executives are public. We can file this with the SEC. You might want to think about zip codes where people live. It stands to reason that someone who comes from a zip code that is a wealthy county near a major city like Westchester County, New York, or Montgomery County, Maryland, or whatever, might have more capacity than someone who doesn't live in a zip code like that, although that's not necessarily true, so on and so forth. So you have to rate them on capacity. So just go through and do a 0 to 10, you know? 0 means they don't have capacity, 10 means they've got huge capacity to easily make a planned gift. And give them a number, you know, 5, 8, yes, you know. So that's the one metric. Second metric is commitment to your organization. And for this example, I always love, you know, for those of us who are in fundraising, we'll talk to people about what we do, and inevitably they'll say, oh, Jeff, you know, you need to go talk to Joe Blow down the street. He made a ton of money with his own business. He's doing really well. He could definitely give money to your organization. When someone, like a board member or someone who may give to your organization makes that suggestion to you, more often than not, despite the charitable intent that they have in making that suggestion to you, that is typically not going to be very helpful. Because Joe Blow down the street, at least in the case of Heritage, obviously we have nice name ID, so most of them have sort of heard of us before. If they're not already giving to you, the chances of you convincing them to give you a major gift, pretty tough. So when someone says that to me, I'll say, you know, Joe, thank you so much for making that suggestion to go talk to Frank down the road. Would you be willing to call Frank for me and maybe go visit Frank with me so we can share with him about the work you support, right? And then usually that's the great, you know, oh, well, I'm too busy, or, you know, that's sort of the great divider. This is all a way of saying, are they committed to your organization? How do you judge commitments? Well, have they been given to you for a reasonable number of years? Thus signaling their support of your organization. Do they come to your events? When you call them, do they take your phone call? Do they respond to your letters? Do they show a willingness to speak? These are some ways you can judge the commitment. Bill Gates has a lot of money. But the likelihood of him supporting the Heritage Foundation, given what we stand for, is pretty unlikely he's going to support it. So we don't spend a lot of time.
That's what I was thinking about Warren Buffett. Who's
Warren
the first
Buffett.
person, he's in my neighborhood. The
Yeah.
first person came to my mind.
Oh, that's right.
He won't ever give me money.
He's probably not going to give you money. He's not going to give Heritage money either, because his view of taxes is quite different than ours. And he's a Hillary supporter. So anyway, go through and identify who on your list ranks high on these two metrics, capacity and commitment. And anybody who is a 5 or above, I would say, is a major gift candidate.
In both of those?
In both. I would do both, yeah. If you've got a one with high commitment, with high commitment but low capacity, they love you, but they don't have the money. So we can't spend time. It gets back to the Willie Sutton line. Why do we rob banks? Right? You know what that is? Because that's where the money is, right? That's why you rob banks, right? That's crash with inspiring fundraising stuff. Yeah. Go ahead.
You know, we've had a situation of people giving us what would appear to be a major gift.
Yeah.
500,000,
Yeah.
2,000, and then never be interested again.
Mm.
And I just never figured that out.
Did you ask them why?
Sometimes they won't even take our call.
Oh.
Or I haven't said, I've never, but when they do, I don't ask them why. I always,
Can I make a suggestion for donors that I've interacted with who either have dropped off or who have reduced their giving from one year to another? I'll ask them why. And here's how I'll do it. I'll say, Mr. Smith, you know, at Heritage, we don't feel entitled to a single dollar. We have to work for every dollar we raise. And so I don't want to ask this question in a way that conveys a sense of entitlement at all. But I did notice that you reduced your giving to us from last year to this year. And I'm just wondering, are you trying to send a message? What's behind that?
and every one of these people are people we've never heard from before.
Oh, well, that's, okay. It's hard to,
Yeah.
it's hard to do mind reading, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have a unique problem, and I don't know if you're going to address it, and I don't mind talking to you later if you have time.
Yeah.
But I have some individuals who I know are large donors, who want to give me money.
Large donors to,
The Warren Buffett category, okay, they're coming to me
okay.
and they're asking me to send a request, and that's why I'm here, because I'm scared to death.
That's right. So you have donors who have the capacity of Warren Buffett, probably less, but.
Way less,
Yeah,
but
okay.
in that
A
category.
lot of money, right?
Yes.
And they're asking you to do what?
They want me to submit a request. A couple of them said, could you submit a grant?
To them for funding?
Yes.
Okay.
I know what I need.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what to ask for. I don't know if I say, this is the amount of this specific project and this is what we want it for, like you write a grant?
Mhm.
Or do I say, go out, request as an angel giver and say, we want to hire 2 employees so we can cover these things? I have no idea how much to ask them. They have a lot of money, but it's their money. Do I ask for 5,000? Do I ask for 10? Do I ask for
Yeah.
25? I don't know it.
I would suggest you ask them these questions.
Oh my gosh.
And say, and I don't know how you, I don't know if they, I don't know if
I'm
they
an
came,
afraid category.
I don't know if they came to you and said, would you please ask us, would you please
They
submit?
know my organization, they know what we do, and they ask me to submit. They want to give me money, and they want me to submit something that says what they're giving it for.
So in that case, I would say, can I come and talk to you about exactly how we can do what you would like us to do?
So that's appropriate, and you can just discuss
Absolutely.
it, right?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah. And then you ask all these questions, and I would just say, I would begin by saying, let me just begin by thank you. My goodness, you have come to us, asking us to ask you for money. Thank you. And so in order for us to do exactly what you want us to do, can I just ask you what you're interested in? What is it that we do of our nonprofit that inspires you? At Heritage, we have this is tough because we cover so many policy areas. We do obviously family religion, we also do defense, we do economic policy, and sometimes some donors love defense. They want to save our country and protect it from the enemy. They don't care about abortion or gay marriage stuff, right? But they're, so I'm selling them on defense, right? So you just ask them and just say, can you tell me, what are you thinking in terms of amounts?
Okay, because the other concern I had was, we're used to operating on, $15,000 to $25,000 a year, and the gifts that they usually give start at $100,000. And so I'm like, what do I even?
And you can say that. You can say, Joe, Mr. Smith, I was looking at some of the grants that your foundation gives
Right.
out, and I noticed that the average gift level is $100,000. Is that the level you're expecting us to submit for?
And then I have to qualify, okay.
And then you just sit on your hands and
Okay.
let them talk.
Okay.
And they will tell you, well, for organizations like yours with smaller budgets, we don't give that big grants, we like to do 10 or 25.
Okay,
There you go.
okay.
Does your heart beat faster when you sit on your hands? After you ask the question.
That's a medical question.
That comes with practice.
It's,
With practice, you'll get better.
yeah,
But
that's right.
just sitting and listening and
Yeah,
staying focused, calm.
that's right.
Don't you ever get afraid that when they say no, you're completely ruining the relationship and you don't know what you did wrong and how do you?
Let's talk about no's in a little bit.
Okay.
We'll get to a no. So once we've identified who our prospects are, through their capacity and their commitment level, the second phase is cultivation. Cultivation. Typically, the higher the amount you're asking for, the more cultivation. How do you cultivate a donor? Well, you cultivate a donor every time you send them something in the mail. That's cultivation. Every time you call them, every time you email them, if you visit them in person, you send note cards. I probably write 5 to 10 note cards per week because I'm always conveying to my donors that I'm thinking of them. Just a little story, one of our donors in Chicago, a very successful guy. This is being recorded, so I won't mention his name. But anyway, successful guy. I went and spent some time with him, and I said, Mike, how many calls do you get from people like me, a major gift officer from charity, in a year? Just guess. Without hesitation, he said about 150. 150 calls from people like me. The question is, how do you stand out? How do you clear through the clutter, right? Wow, that was an amazing answer. I didn't even know about this. So you want to try to cultivate that. The best cultivation in the major gift space is face-to-face, in person. Just like you were saying, listening with them, visiting with them. And in that first meeting, if you get the meeting, which getting the meeting is 80% of the job, in this day and age, that is just the hardest part, is getting the meeting. I want to try to find out three things in that first meeting. The most important thing, and it goes back to Abraham Maslow, is why do they give? Why do they give to you? Why did they write that down? The answer to that question will guide your engagement with that person, probably for the rest of your relationship with them. Why did they give? What prompted them? Is this a one-time gift? Did they come into an inheritance, and this is not going to continue? Did they have a particular passion? Did they come from a family background where this was important to them? The gentleman who talked about recidivism, maybe their dad was in prison, or maybe they were in prison, and they got out and they made it successful. So there's a real personal connection, right? All these things are really important. Maybe they're giving because they want to honor their dad or their mom who's passed away. That's important too. So why do they give? How did they make their money? Usually someone who's given a major gift has money. So we want to know how they made it. Is it a successful business that they started? Is it a business that they inherited from their dad? Did they choose their parents wisely and inherit the money that they've gotten? And all these are really relevant to the development strategy for a particular donor. And then thirdly, I always like to find out information about their family. Are they married? How many times have they been married? Do they have kids? Do they like their kids? Do their kids like them? Their kids hate them. Very important. Information to find out. As you're meeting with someone, it's the 70-30 rule. You're listening 70% of the time. And you're talking 30% of the time. So that means you're doing mostly listening. We talked about listening the gift in major gift fundraising. Here's a little tip as well. People remember what they said much more than they remember what you said. People remember what they say much more than they remember what you say. So if you can get them to say something that meshes with your mission and why you're there, you'll have a much easier time reminding them of what they said in support of your mission. Kind of like when in the Christian tradition we use the words of God that He has given to us in His scriptures, we pray them back to Him. You want to get your donor to use the words that you're using, rather than just you telling the donor. Okay, so we identify, we cultivate. That leads to the third step, which is soliciting. You can cultivate, you can build relationships, you can hang out with people, but there comes a point where we gotta ask, right? And I was dating my wife. Probably shouldn't say this, but we dated I knew my wife for 8 years before we got married. And that was really not good. This whole early marriage, it's because I didn't ask. And I should. Anyway, so you gotta ask. After you have identified, you cultivate, you have to ask. So what do we ask for? We have 5 questions for solicitation. What are we asking for? Who is asking? Who's doing the asking? For what? When are we going to ask? And how will you ask? Okay? Yeah. What are we asking for? Who is doing the asking? For what? When do we ask? And how are we going to ask? Generally, the higher the amount that you're asking for, the more inputs the donor needs to check off before they can say yes. And this is true in our lives too. So for example, if I come up to you today, based on, I've never met you before today, right? If I was your next door neighbor, and I came up to you and I said, what's your name? Kimberly. Kimberly, my kids' soccer team, they need new uniforms for their soccer team. We're raising money. Would you be willing to give $50? What about 10?
Yes, I would.
Boom. Okay, so right there, $10. You just needed to hear me ask you for 10, right? If I asked you for 50, would you consider 50? You said no. If I came back and said, well, what would it take for me to get you to give $50? You might say, well, you know what? My budget's pretty tight. Let me check with my husband and see if we can do that, right? If I ask you for $5,000 or whatever the numbers are, $50,000, the higher up you go, the more people the donor has to check with. He's got an accountant. He's got to talk to his CFO at his company. He might have a lawyer. He might have other people that advise him, a financial advisor. So just being mindful of the fact that donors, the higher you go, the more donors have to check off to get to that big one. So who is asking? Generally the higher amount is the CEO. For what? Generally the higher the amount, it's typically for a specific project rather than general operations. So I'm just thinking generally from the UN NGO, you could probably come up with a specific way to endow one of the future women who's going to be going to the UN, That could be a way to get someone to get a lot of money for your particular mission.
What's an endowment? I hear them all the time, but that's...
Basically, an endowment, and obviously there are technical definitions of the term. Endowment is different than annual, and that annual is a check you write every year. An endowment is one check that you write that will throw off the amount of money that you would typically generate for a year. And it's usually a 5%. That's typically how endowments work. It's how we do it at Heritage. So, for example, if you want to sponsor an intern in the Heritage Foundation internship program, it's a $10,000 annual gift. If you want to endow in perpetuity an intern, it's $200,000 because that at 5% generates $10,000 a year. Endowment offers in perpetuity. At your colleges and universities, this is where they have a competitive advantage over us at Heritage because colleges and universities can offer endowments at a much lower level. You can endow a scholarship usually for $25,000, right? At 5%, that's about $1,250 a year. So that's the general difference. Okay, Aristotle said this: to give away money is an easy matter and in any man's power, but to decide to whom to give it, how large and when, and for what purpose and how, is neither in every man's power nor an easy matter. That's Aristotle from the Machiavellians. He understood the difficulty of giving away money. So as we come alongside our donors who are asking themselves this question, we act as a philanthropic consultant for them. What happens if you get a no? The first thing I try to do is discerning. This is going to sound crude, but it's illustrative. I try to distinguish between a no and a hell no. If it's a hell no, I'll move on because I don't want to make the person mad, right? Most no's are not hell no's. Most no's are no for now. No because the project's wrong. No because something in my life is happening that is preventing me from giving to you. So when someone says no, it's up to us to probe. Well, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Was it the wrong project? Is it the wrong amount? Do you need some time to pay off such a big gift? I realize, Mr. Smith, that I've asked you for a lot of money there. Would you need some time to pay off that gift so we can make this happen? So it's exploring what does that no mean, which is so instructive as to how you come back to the gift. Finally, I just want to get to the last section of major gift, how we steward these gifts, the last process in the cycle. So we've identified them, we've cultivated them, we've solicited them, and then hopefully we'll say yes. So once they say yes, what do we do then? This is the area where I think most nonprofits drop the ball. They're terrible stewards of donors. What does it mean to steward a good donor? It means thanking them. Do you know how many nonprofits fail to thank their donors in a timely fashion?
Yeah.
It is a scandal in nonprofit relationships. I met with a headmaster of a small faith-based classical school 2 weeks ago. We were talking about fundraising, and I said, David, if I send you $100 what happens to that check right now when it hits your PO box? He smiled, he turned red, he said, I know I should know the answer to that question, I have no idea. We need to have systems in place where we're thanking our donors within 72 hours. And I say that it should actually be within 48 hours or 24 hours. But 72 hours is every 3 days. You can make Tuesday and Friday your thank you letter running day, right? For all the gifts that came in the last 4 or 3 days, we thank our donors. We call them to thank them. We use the phone to thank them. We send them information on subjects that we know are of interest to them. We share with them the victories that we've had through our work. We invite them to events so that they can see the impact of our work. We might recognize them, depending on the level, at those events, asking them to offer an invitation, or introduce a speaker, those kinds of things. There's a rule in fundraising, we thank a donor 7 times. 7 times. Now, that's not a slavish rule, it's a biblical 7. You know, when someone's forgiving you 7 times 7, right? You mean 49 times. You forgive inexhaustibly, right? So we thank donors and we steward. And why do we steward? We steward because it's the right thing to do. If you make a big gift to an organization, you'd like to be thanked. But we also steward because with effective stewardship, we help to identify, and that leads to cultivating, and that leads to the next big gift. It's a circle. The major gift cycle is a circle. Okay? All right. Gosh, I can see someone has come up here and advanced my watch without me noticing this at 3:15. And I have to leave by 3:45. So.
Was that someone in the central time zone?
Maybe it was. I'm going to hand out something. We were going to take time to do this now, but we're not going to do this now. This is a. I'm just going to hand this. Can someone hand this out for me? Sure. Yeah. This is what I did is I went to the Chronicle of Philanthropy website. I think it was a week ago, and they have a major gifts roundup that they published. These are big, 7, 8-figure gifts from around the country. And I just printed off their roundup from, they do it every week. And what I want you to do is take this home and read this and try to identify the ways in which these institutions help secure these big gifts. And you'll notice that many of them were able to solicit these gifts using some of the things that we talked about in the earlier class. Okay? All right. So we talked about direct mail, we talked about major gifts. Now let's talk about the third category of fundraising, and that is legacy giving, planned giving. I run planned giving at Heritage. As we think about legacy or planned giving, I love what one of the major planned giving consultants in the country, Robert Sharp, says. He says that when someone remembers your charity in their estate, they are elevating you to the status of family member or loved one. If you think about who gets remembered in wills or estates, right? It's family members and it's deeply loved friends. So when someone does that with a charity, they are raising you to that level. Boy, an amazing thing that our folks do for us. Okay, planned giving, the definition that we use at Heritage is any gift that requires some sort of foresight before the gift is made or input of an advisor to complete. Any kind of foresight to do it, for the future, or that requires the help of an advisor like a lawyer to complete. At Heritage, and this is one of the funnest parts of my job, you will see people who have been giving $25, $50, $100 a year, and doing that for 15 years, 20 years, and boom, they will remember you for 100,000, 500,000. We have a guy, his name is written here, I'm not going to tell you his name, but he's from St. Louis, Missouri. We never met with him. His lifetime total was $720, and we have, he passed away late last year. We realized $860,000 from this person. We never knew him, never knew him. He remembered us as the sole beneficiary of like 5 different life insurance policies. So, boom, this can make a huge difference for the work of our nonprofits. A couple of things under planned giving. 90% of all planned giving in the country is one sentence. One sentence that you write in your will or your living trust. And that sentence is, I give, bequeath, or devise X amount, X percentage, or X asset to whatever the name of your charity is for its charitable and educational purposes. That's it. 90% of all planned giving in America is that sentence added to a will or a living trust.
Can you say it again?
I give, bequeath, or devise X amount, percentage, or asset to the name of the charity for its charitable or educational purposes. It requires a lawyer to add that codicil to a will or living trust. But my point in saying this is that all of you in this room can tell a donor about a bequest, right? If you know that sentence, boom, all of a sudden you have access to 90% of all planned giving in the country. So if someone talks to you about their estate, or if you know they're in a particular phase of life where they're thinking about these things, and you ask them, have you ever thought about remembering the World Congress of Families in your estate plan? You can answer the question that will come back to you, well, what does that mean? Well, here's what it means. It means adding a sentence to your will so that, after you're finished and after you've taken care of your kids, if you have any charitable intention, you remember us when you do that. You don't have, my point is, you don't have to be a specialist, you don't have to be a trust lawyer, I'm not a lawyer, to inspire 90% of planned giving. Another very simple way, and this is what this donor from St. Louis did, is, and you don't even need a lawyer for this, is to make a charity the beneficiary of a life insurance policy or a retirement plan. One little tip is a traditional IRA is a dreadful asset to pass along to your children. A traditional IRA is a dreadful asset. And the reason is because that money will be treated as income to the person, to the beneficiary, and therefore it will be taxed as income to them, subject to federal income and state income, and if they live in a city, city income tax. So if you have a donor who has a $100,000 IRA, and they say, well, I'm just going to leave this to my kid, well, guess what? That's going to bump your kid's income up $100,000 in the year that they get it. And depending on their tax rate, it could be taxed at 40%. So all of a sudden, that $100,000 becomes $60,000 to your kid. It is amazing to me how many sophisticated business owners, very successful, have no idea that this is true. No idea. What they could do, and what you can talk to them about, is saying, we want you to take care of your kid, obviously, family first. Leave them an asset that is not as tax disadvantaged. And give this to charity. Because if they choose to remember Heritage or your organization as the beneficiary of that, all of that goes to the charity. There is no tax implication. It's an example of how you can bring some, just some advice to people. Phrases that people use that are phrases that might tip you off in the legacy of planned giving arena is, I wish I could do more. You get into a meeting, you say, Mrs. Jones, just want to come by and thank you for your gift of $500 or $1,000, and they say, oh, thank you for all your work. I really wish I could do more. Well, Mrs. Jones, there's a way you can do more. And that can lead to a discussion of their estate. I never had any kids of my own. But, well, ding, 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 I wish I could say that donors who have kids are great legacy prospects. They're not as good as those who don't have kids. I'm sorry. Because, our kids need our support. But if you have a donor who you know has no kids, or no heirs, huge legacy prospect. Okay, who do we target? So think about who we target for legacy giving. Donors who've been, like I said, have been with you for 5+ years consistently. That's a long time. And so they're signaling to you that they believe in your work. And so I would One of the things you could do is take a look at your donor list and see who's been giving to me to us for 5+ years. And come up with an appeal letter or a visit plan or something to reach out to them, to ask them about their legacy. I say at Heritage, it's taken the progressives 100 years to get us into the mess that we're in this country, and it's going to take us 100 years to get out.
I don't believe that.
We can have a conversation about that later, but we actually have a plan to get us out of the mess, but it's going to take us a long time. And your legacy gift will help us reclaim America. So that's one of the appeals that we sometimes make to legacy givers. Okay, let me just move along because of the time we have here. We talked about why fundraising, we talked about how fundraising, a couple words about some practical issues in fundraising. And let me just mention one practical issue, and that is a word about events. A lot of people like to use events in fundraising. And we have an events team that we do events across the country. Generally speaking, as fundraising tools, I am really not hot on events. And that is because they take a ton of work, and for far too many nonprofits, there is not a clearly defined development purpose. How will this event help us raise more money? And so if you're thinking about doing an event for fundraising purposes, I would just step back and ask, what is the plan for us undertaking all this work? How are we going to actually use this event to raise more money? Are we going to have a solicitation at the event? I come from Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and it seems like every nonprofit in the world has their fall fundraising banquet, now. Tomorrow evening is an organization I used to work for, and they have, it's the typical kind of thing. They've got rubber chicken banquet, where they've got the envelope in the center, and at the end there's sort of this kind of financial altar call that they do, and you get out the envelope and pass it around. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But that's a plan. This is how we're going to use this event to raise more money. You can also use a host committee for an event, and have a minimum level of giving to be on that host committee, and public recognition. I want to thank these 5 couples for agreeing to serve on the host committee. Maybe it's utilizing various event functions to recognize donors. At Heritage events, we always do a prayer, a pledge, and an introduction of our speaker. So we usually use those slots to recognize existing major gift donors and to thank them for their gift. So anyway, I just want to sort of bring that to your attention. And also, you may want to just do a pure thank you event. Some sort of reception to just thank your major donors. We do that quite a bit.
I have one more question. Are events good for creating that relationship? If maybe you didn't raise a lot of money, but you
Yes,
opened the door?
they are for cultivation and for prospecting. Yes. Can I ask someone to pass this out? Not sure. Yes, they can be, so long as you know that is the purpose. That is the purpose of the event. I guess what I'm just saying is have a purpose. Don't just have an event and have an event. Okay, I want to sort of close up with a couple of things here. What I'm passing out to you is, I'll get to that in 1 minute. Let me just sort of summarize what I've talked about today. I came up with sort of 9 rules for fundraising that I hope are helpful to you. Number 1, there is a correlation between asking for gifts and receiving gifts. That's the organization. Somebody famous once said, "Ask and ye shall receive." He was onto something. Yeah. Here's one that I think is really important. People give to that which they help to create. As you read through that listing of major gift donors from the Chronicle of Philanthropy, notice how many of those donors were involved with the organization in a formal way, on a board of trustees, on some other kind of board that the university asked them to be involved in. People give to that which they helped create. So are there opportunities that your nonprofit is giving to your best donors and prospects to get them more involved. This is also kind of common sense, right? You know, people who are on the board tend to give more money. People who help to run a church tend to be bigger, you know, more active and more volunteer sensitive. Number 3, our donors are human beings first, not ATMs or checkbooks who look like human beings. They are human beings first. So much of fundraising is about hitting up people or seeing people as targets or twisting arms. There's a donor to Heritage who's Irish, and he always comes up to me and says, "Oh, are you going to put the bite on me, Jeff?" You know? No, I'm not here to put the bite on you or twist your arm. It's not what I can get from you. It's rather how I can create an opportunity for you to support the cause that you care about. You've told us you care about. Good stewardship is about recognizing and thanking donors, number 4. Understanding why donors give is the most important piece of information you can have regarding any of your donors. Why do they give? You can't make donors give. You can't make them give. That's why I love our donors so much. They give because it's their decision to give. But we can do a lot of things to help them along in this process so that they're more likely to give. We can inform, we can educate, we can inspire, and we can cultivate them, hopefully increasing the chances that they will give. People typically are motivated to give emotionally, hence stories of impact, taking primacy. Fundraising at its heart is matchmaking. Have you thought about fundraising as matchmaking? There's a movie maybe 25 years ago called Crossing Delancey. Anybody know this movie, Crossing Delancey? In the Jewish community, there are like women whose job it is to connect young Jewish kids with other young Jewish kids. They matchmake. That's what we do. We're matching our donors with the causes that they want. And then finally, our donors merely have money and a passion to change the world. We have the solutions that they are seeking to achieve with their passions. I handed out to you, this is just a sheet of resources for your further study or sort of perusal. These are resources that I use and have used, and I divide them into 3 different categories: blogs, books, and consultants. Blogs, I'll just go through these. caseconsulting.com. I get it every day. I read it every day. It's an awesome fundraising blog. Heavy and strong in major gift work. So that's what it is. Clarification.com. It does major gift, but also smaller dollars. And these are free, by the way, just sign up for it. She also has a free thank you ebook that you can download to help you tighten up your thank you process. Very practical, very good book that you can freely download. Mark Pittman, who has one called The Fundraising Coach. That's a weekly one. Really good stuff. Good on board engagement, how to get your board involved. Future Fundraising Now is strong on marketing. GuideStar, that's another excellent resource. Michael Hyatt, more just sort of general productivity. He's the former CEO of Thomas Nelson Publishers. He's very good on marketing platform, communications. Excellent. I read it every day. Kevin Gentry is with the Evil Koch brothers, right? Everybody on the left loves to attack the Koch brothers. He's with the Koch brothers, and he has a bi-weekly email on fundraising and development that is excellent. You can just email me or get in touch with me, and I'll send you his mail. Robert Sharp is probably the most foremost plain giving consultant in the country. He has a free newsletter called Give and Take that comes out, I think, every month. It's very good. Books that I think are really helpful. I mentioned Forces for Good. Fundraising Principles in Practice is the textbook. It's literally 800 pages. It's the textbook for fundraising. I'm about halfway through, but it's excellent overview of the whole profession. The Artful Journey by Sturdivant is the best major gift fundraising book I have ever read in my life. It's $40. You can get it on Amazon. It's worth every penny, so you might want to buy that. Asking by Jerry Panis Jerry is a legend. The book Asking, I think, is like $11. It will take you 60 minutes to read. It's designed to take you 1 hour to read. And it's all about asking for gifts. Unlimited Sales Success, Brian Tracy is on the board of Heritage. Just a good general sales book. Let's see, Bob Hartsook has a number of these. He's our consultant. Rainmaking, which I don't like that term because it's more matchmaking, but anyway, rainmaking is a good one. And then the last one there, retention fundraising. I've detected sort of a trend. What are we doing to retain our donors? You know, it's much easier to retain existing donors than to get new donors. And so what are we doing? There's a whole book written on that subject, very practical, very good book that I think will help you. And then I've just listed some consultants that we work with at Heritage. Now obviously, Heritage is a $96 million organization, so we were able to work with a lot of them, but these are the best ones. They all have websites that you can go to to get great information. Who do I want to point out? National Christian Foundation is awesome. They are a $1 billion plus foundation based in Atlanta, and they handle most of our non-cash asset gifts. So if someone has a piece of property or a boat or something to give you, we work with NCF. They take care of all of it. They take a fee, and then we get the money. So you have some donors who, this is one, yeah, 90, for major gift donors, 90% of their assets are non-liquid. For major gift donors, 90% of their assets are non-liquid, meaning they're not in a checking account. You can't get to them quickly. So if that's true, how can we get them to release some of that 90% to our work? And that's non-cash asset giving. NCF helps us do that.
So they can, if someone leaves a house, they can take care of that?
Yeah.
Even if you use it for your organization, or they just liquidate it?
Well, different ways people give houses. So you can just outright give a house to a nonprofit, but the nonprofit has to do a bunch of due diligence. We have to have all the, you know, you've got to do the home inspection. You've got to anything, you know, to receive the gift, and then you have to do something with the house once you receive it. You have to sell it, right? You have to get a real estate agent and so on and so forth. They take care of all that stuff. And then once they sell the property, they'll just send us a check minus, I think it's a 5%, depending on the arrangement fee. We love it because we're not in the house buying and selling business, we're in the public policy business. And so this allows us to stay focused on that and have them, and they're the best in the world. Yes?
A lot of fundraising involves talking to people, communicating with people. Have you done Toastmasters?
Me? No.
Yeah.
No.
Do you know anything about Toastmasters?
It sort of trains young professionals on how to give presentations and speak.
Toastmasters is about how to communicate with people,
Yeah.
whether face-to-face, over the phone, newsprint, how to communicate with people. And leadership is also involved. So if you want to become an eloquent, dignified, clear, crystal clear speaker,
I can.
like him, right?
Yeah.
Try Toastmasters.
Good. Yes, in the back.
I'm just wondering if you can briefly touch on online fundraising.
Yeah.
I know, like, when you go on a website, the very first thing that pops up is that box, like, and you go to a different page, it pops up. I'm
Yeah.
wondering if you can tell us briefly, like, what's most effective, if they have those little temperature gauges at the top and it moves every day.
Yeah.
What have you found is most effective or least effective?
Yeah, so like direct marketing, it's not my area of expertise. It is becoming a bigger and bigger piece of our fundraising pie at Heritage. Even with donors, the average age of which I mentioned earlier is 71, it's becoming a bigger and bigger thing. This last consultant, Tim Kaczuriak from this company, Next After, we work with Tim. His whole company is focused on answering the exact question you just asked. What is the most effective? And he has analyzed, I think it's like 18,000 end-of-year email appeals and websites. And he has boiled it down into that exact question. What color is your donate button? What exactly are you asking for? All that kind of stuff. So if you go look him up online and go to his website, he has a free, I think it's a weekly email. It's not as helpful to me because I'm a major in legacy giving, but it might be really helpful to you. He's a great guy. So I hope that helps answer. Yeah.
I was wondering again, when you ask somebody for money,
Yeah.
often I will, ask them, the versus, I'm sorry, the difference between asking for an amount
Yep.
versus they'll say, well, I'll get back with you or something.
Yep.
Do you ask everybody for an amount?
Yeah.
Okay, you ask,
I mean,
you don't just say, can I get a donation? And they go, well, okay, I'll send you something.
Yeah, the higher up you go, I think the more specific you need to be, right? So, and I sort of generally meet with people who are giving 1,000 or more to Heritage. So if I want to get someone from 1 to 10, I will ask them for $10,000. And if they said, and the reason is because I want to hear their response. Obviously, I want to hear yes, absolutely, or here's my credit card, or whatever. But I want to know, how does that number strike them, right? If I ask someone for $10,000 and they immediately say, oh, sure, I know I probably asked for 2 of them. That's okay, it's fine. It's, it's 10 times more than they're currently giving, right? But I want to try to be as specific as possible because I want to try to get them to respond, and I want to interpret, I want to exegete that response so that I can figure out why they're giving, And the other thing you brought up that I want to comment on, I'll get back to you later when you think about that. I always say, well, Mr. Smith, thank you so much for considering that. And what would be a great way for me to follow up? Should I call you in a week? Would that be okay? And usually they'll say yes. So mentally, you've got no permission now to follow up, rather than just letting it hang there. Because if we let it hang there, we're all busy, we're all doing other stuff, we'll never get back to it. We'll never get back to it. Yeah.
Before you take off and I gotta go too, can you give us your contact information? How does that work?
Gosh, I should have printed this out, shouldn't I? I have some cards. How about I just give you a card? You can take one of those, and I'm delighted to. Yeah, sure. And then also, any other questions? Who else wants to ask a question? Yes.
Just a comment about the artful journey as against asking.
Yeah.
I've talked to a number of people who work in your profession, and they all say asking is the best book.
It's very
You're saying that, in your opinion, artful journey.
Yeah.
Can you comment on that?
Sure. So asking, like I said, I think it's like 70 pages double spaced. I mean, it'll take, literally, it'll take you, it took me like 2 hours because I'm kind of I'm not as fast as I learned, but very fast. And it's all about sort of asking for money and stories. Jerry Panis is the consummate major gift fundraiser. He's done $1 billion campaigns. So he tells stories of his previous asks, and that's really helpful. Artful Journey is a more comprehensive, it's a longer, I think it's 300 pages, and it's sort of soup to nuts for major gift fundraising. How to get in the door, how to engage donor, how to do donor strategy, how to do this capacity commitment rating. He's got charts in there for that. How to get more specificity on the nature of the ask, how to follow up. It's much more sort of hands-on and practical and more comprehensive, bigger book. That's why it's $40 and not $10. Yeah.
I am really sick of hearing the Cars for Kids radio commercial, which
Okay.
is in every city in America.
Yeah, right.
I looked up their website,
Yeah.
they, just on administration expenses for that endeavor is about 17 million.
Out of how much do they raise?
I can't remember, it's a big number.
Okay.
And some years they break even, and some years they don't, but they're now getting into not only donate your car, but donate, your house and donate, legacy
Yeah.
type gifts and that kind of thing. Is there any way that they can get a new song? Because it just, advertising typically, if you run a commercial so long, that's it, you can only run it for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
They violate that rule big time.
They probably violate it because it works.
Right.
Yeah, we don't really do much with vehicle stuff at Heritage. We'll do it, but it's such a pain in the rear, and it usually there's not a lot of money there, for the juice is not worth the squeeze, But if you are interested in this, there's another resource, idonate.com, that was founded by the National Christian Foundation guys. They do online and they can also do vehicle stuff. We've used that in the past. But they'll take 40%, so it's a big fee. But if that's helpful to you.
Is that what they pay, like after that, charge anything up front? It's just?
No, they take it after they sell it online. So if the car's 10,000, they'll send you 6, or whatever it is. Any other final questions before our time? Yes?
I'm from India, and we have the corporate social responsibility
Yeah?
program. Do they have the same corporate social responsibility among the corporates in this country?
They do. This is a particular way of investing, corporate social responsibility. And I don't know very much about it. But most of it has to do with not investing in fossil fuels or sustainable, that kind of stuff. It's kind of PC stuff. I would imagine most of our organizations would not benefit from this CSP. One final resource for you as I